We have a number of important reports coming out of Israel. This one I referenced a couple times. Let's put this up on the screen. So this is from Lancet, which is widely respected medical journal. And there's always been this question of what the true death toll in Gaza actually is. And there have been concerted efforts to deny the reports of the deaths coming out of Gaza, because the only people who are available to count the dead is the Gaza Health Ministry, which they love to call the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. Now, their numbers have been pretty accurate in the past. However, according to these experts, they say if you look at past conflicts and you look at the level of devastation and destruction of infrastructure and medical care, et cetera, in Gaza, they say applying a conservative estimate of 4 indirect deaths per 1 direct death to the 37,396 deaths reported, which, by the way, doesn't even include those buried under the rubble, it's not implausible to estimate that up to 186,000 or even more deaths could be attributable to the current conflict in Gaza. They describe this as a conservative estimate. In past conflicts, the ratio of direct deaths to indirect has been up to 15. It's certainly possible in Gaza. We're seeing that level, just again, given the level of destruction. As I mentioned before, this does not even include those who are considered to be buried under the rubble, which is about another 10,000 individuals. But even with this conservative estimate, you're talking about 8% of the population of Gaza that has been killed in this conflict. 8%. So, we've even had the White House denying the death toll. You've had members of Congress directly denying the death toll. And we've been saying all along that, if anything, it is very likely the number of deaths are being understated. Now you have a medical journal publishing an analysis exactly to that effect, that you could have somewhere around 8% of the entire Palestinian population in Gaza that has been killed, Saagar.
Well, it would be abnormal that it would be only 37. It doesn't take a genius, to figure it out. What? From famine, hunger conditions,
sanitation,
mass displacement. I mean, yeah, exactly. Even in a normal, in any place, even if there was no bombing or anything going on, if you forcibly take people over 1.8 million or something and move them out of their homes, a lot of people are going to die. People who are old, people who need medical condition, access to medicine, et cetera. Add war on top of that. It's very much like what happened in the U.S. invasion of Iraq, where we would estimate the death tolls, and then the eventual real tally that came out a decade later was almost 10 times the initial number that was estimated. And it was specifically for these reasons, with mass displacement, the bombing campaign, and elsewhere. So it only confirms what I think a lot of people already know.
Yeah, and I think it'll be years before we really know the toll. And that's also common in conflicts.
Very.
And especially here, you've had the Israeli government, which has denied any independent access to be able to assess the toll. And then they deny the death toll, even though they prohibit anyone else from being able to come in and assess the situation themselves. So, for those who have long suspected that the death toll is quite a lot larger than the official numbers, I think this provides a lot of confirmation for that. At the same time, for those who have been being raked across the coals, we're talking about the Hannibal directive from the beginning, even though even the New York Times indicated that the Hannibal directive had been used at least in one instance. You now have Haaretz with some blockbuster reporting here, confirming, by the way, the reporting of a number of independent outlets, that the IDF did order the Hannibal directive on October 7th to prevent Hamas taking soldiers captive. Here are some of the details that we can pull out here. They say one of those decisions was made at 7:18 a.m. when an observation post at the Yifta outpost reported someone had been kidnapped at the Erez border crossing adjacent to the IDF's liaison office. Hannibal at Erez, came the command from divisional headquarters. Dispatch a Zeke. The Zeke is an unmanned assault drone, and the meaning of this command was clear. At another time, at 11:22 a.m., across the entire Gaza division network, the order was issued. Not a single vehicle can return to Gaza, meaning that if you are in the area and you see cars headed back to Gaza, you don't need to worry about whether these are civilians who are fleeing, whether there are people on board who are kidnapped. In fact, that's the whole purpose of the Hannibal directive, is that you would rather kill those civilians then allow them to be taken and to be kidnapped into Gaza. So, as we move forward and we think about that horrific death toll on October 7th, it is a legitimate question to say how many of those were Hamas and how many of those were IDF. That is not to deny Hamas atrocities on that day, something we have said consistently and will continue to say. However, there were multiple instances now documented by a number of outlets, the latest being Haaretz, an Israeli news outlet, that the Hannibal directive was employed in multiple instances and civilians were fired on by the IDF in an attempt to prevent kidnappings from occurring. So this is an astonishing blockbuster revelation and a truly courageous bit of reporting too for Haaretz, which, Haaretz is a, sort of liberal Zionist publication by and large. They have shown a lot of courage in the way that they have reported some aspects of this, in particular some of the Hamas atrocity lies from October 7th, and have earned themselves direct threats of being shut down and banned by the government because of their reporting. So, I really applaud them for being willing to put this out.
Yeah, no, it's actually, look, at a certain point, it's also it's July 9th, so it took 10 months for them to put that out. The UN already put it out, and there were already questions October 17th.
I forgot the UN had even said it. Yeah, we covered that,
it here on the show. So, I don't know, in a certain sense, it's like you're following it a little bit. That said, of course, it does actually take a long time to confirm something like this, and it does mean something that an Israeli paper were to actually admit it. But it does seem like in the midst of the Biden news that a lot of the things that have been confirmed or things bubbling underneath the surface, I don't think anything is going particularly good for Israel. And we have to keep our eyes on it, right? Because things could explode at any moment. Israeli troops are now back in Gaza City, which in itself is an admission of failure. Yeah, there's Rafah, that continues. I saw reporters that are on the ground. There's like full-on active combat that's inside. So all of the talk, and then the Israeli generals who actually are for a ceasefire because they're like, hey, we don't have any weapons anymore. They're like, we can't keep this shit going. And then so the government is all, torn apart. So I would say if anything, like this is the time if I were them to actually try and do a ceasefire, but we'll see.
Yeah,
I know we're going to talk about
the
that.
Political calculus continues to be against that for Netanyahu. The latest that you see these insane news reports that are like the sticking point in the ceasefire deal is that Israel wants to continue fighting. It's like, well, what kind of a ceasefire deal is this?
Yeah.
If it includes, but we want to keep fighting. We're going to talk to Jeremy and Ryan more about this because they have some really quite important insights into the way that Hamas is viewing all of this. And they agree with the Israeli analysts who have said this has been a failure for Israel. Now, Hamas disgustingly also treats civilian life very casually, including Palestinian civilian life. That also comes across in these interviews, but definitely stay tuned for that because you want to hear more from their perspective, which I know is always very controversial, but we've always said it's important to understand the perspective of all of the actors that are involved in these conflicts, regardless of how you feel about them. There was another blockbuster piece of reporting from another Israeli outlet that has done extraordinary work throughout this conflict. This is Plus 972 magazine. The headline here from Oren Ziv is, "I'm bored, so I shoot. The Israeli army's approval of free-for-all violence in Gaza." So we can put this next piece up on the screen. They were able to speak to 6 different sources, IDF soldiers, all of them, who confirmed many of the reports from Palestinian civilians on the ground. They recounted how Israeli soldiers routinely executed Palestinian civilians simply because they entered an area the military defined as a no-go zone. The testimonies paint a picture of a landscape littered with civilian corpses which are left to rot or be eaten by stray animals. The army only hides them from view ahead of the arrival of international aid convoys so that images of people in advanced stages of decay do not come out. Two of the soldiers also testified to a systematic policy of setting Palestinian homes on fire after occupying them. You could put the next piece up on the screen. They also described how the ability to shoot without restrictions gave soldiers a way to blow off steam or relieve the dullness of their daily routine. Quote, "People want to experience the event fully," a reservist who served in northern Gaza recalled. "I personally fired a few bullets for no reason into the sea or at the sidewalk of an abandoned building. They report it as normal fire, which is a code name for I'm bored, so I shoot." I really encourage you to read this entire report, which again confirms some of the things that we've been talking about for a while, including any Palestinian man, woman, child, etc., elderly who wanders into a quote unquote no-go zone. It's open season on them to just kill them. They also report that any man who is killed, whether there's any proof whatsoever that they're Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or any other sort of resistance fighter, every single man is assumed to be a terrorist, and so they're logged as, this is a Hamas fighter who is killed. That's why Israel's numbers are so much higher than what anyone else estimates in terms of the Hamas fighters that they have killed. And to go back to Joe Biden and what a nice guy he is, this is what he's allowed. This is what he's overseen. This is what he's been too weak to stop, even when at times he's voiced some weak objections to what is going on here. And in fact, Saagar, yesterday, I don't know if you saw this exchange. John Kirby admitted that Israel was indiscriminately firing on civilians.
Oh, I didn't.
He said, it's always unfortunate when civilians are fired on indiscriminately, and we continue to talk to Israel and try to get them to be more precise. Like they just openly acknowledge the war crimes now, like it's no big deal.
Here's what drives me nuts, and we have this. Let's put this up there on the screen. This is why it absolutely makes me lose my mind. The entire press corps and everybody yesterday was like, oh, Russia struck a children's hospital in deadly barrage across Ukraine. 40 missiles hit this children's hospital. And it's like, yeah, it would be terrible if something hit a children's hospital, right? And as they put right there, deadly strike hits northern Gaza hospital. I mean, it was a week prior, maybe days prior, that Israel hit a children's hospital in Gaza, and they didn't care. And they probably did that, by the way, with American weapons. So spare me the moral to this conflict. And again, I don't believe in moral language on all of this stuff. I believe it should be conducted in terms of great power, what's in it for us or not. But you can't selectively do it. Right. And this whole week here in Washington is an entire, apotheosis of Ukraine. Everything is about, this poor little unjust Ukraine, which got invaded. I'm not saying it's just, and by the way, I think it's terrible that the Russians are striking a children's hospital. But how are you going to go to the International Criminal Court, The Hague, and everywhere else, and prop up international institutions to go after your geopolitical foe when you're backing one of your allies doing the exact same thing?
Yeah.
It rings nothing. So the Russians, what do you think they're doing? I saw, this is hilarious, there are all these Indian experts here in America, and one of them was like, I'm so disappointed at Modi for going to Russia and for hugging Putin. And the man was like, I guess India's just is only looking out for its own national interests. I'm like, yeah, it would be a real shame to have a president who only looked out for their national interests. And if you're Modi and you're seeing all this stuff that's going on with America, Israel, and everybody else, I go, why should I listen to you? You're a joke. You're going to lecture me not to go visit. You're going to Bibi, and you guys are you invited Bibi to your country to speak in your Congress. You're going to lecture me? I'm going to go get some cheap gas, folks, because I got 1 billion poor people that I'm supposed to care for. They'll just never understand.
I keep coming back to that column from earlier, I don't know, maybe a couple months in after October 7th that said, this is going to cheapen all human life. It doesn't just stay in Gaza. And that's exactly true, because I feel the same thing. I see 9 Ukrainians killed. It's
right.
That's nothing. And obviously that's not true. That's a disgusting way to look at it, because these are human beings who had lives and families and dreams and aspirations. And there should be horror and outrage at a children's hospital being struck here by Russia, or a children's hospital being struck in Gaza by Israel. But if we could put C4 back up on the screen here, because it's not just the lack of the moral language, it's the inability to ascribe blame appropriately. So when it's Russia, the headline is very direct. Russia strikes children's hospital in deadly barrage across Ukraine. Oh, okay, I understand who the aggressor was. I understand what they struck. I understand what happened here. Here, when it was Gaza, it's deadly strike hits northern Gaza hospital where many were sheltering. Oh, well, whose deadly strike, as Asal Rott, who has tracked many of these things over the course of this war, say, who committed that deadly strike? Gee, I don't know. Did a bomb just fall out of the sky? Who can say? this hypocrisy is something, by the way, that Matthew Miller was just pressed on yesterday as well, State Department ghoul Matthew Miller. And, okay, well, how come you're able to very quickly assess and condemn Russia striking a hospital, but when it's Israel, we're going to talk to them. There's got to be an investigation. We don't really know what happened. And of course, he just, spins, oh, it's totally different. Of course it's not. Like, you are able to make these assessments in real time, clearly, when it comes to a country you don't like Russia. But when it's our great ally with our weapons, by the way, being used to strike these hospitals, suddenly you're going to have to get back to us, which we all know you literally never will. Or you'll say, oh, well, we'll trust the Israelis to investigate themselves. Okay, yeah, that's real credible. So no, their lies and the hypocrisy are so brazen that I don't think, even they can't say these things anymore with a straight face because it's just so obvious to the world what's really going on.
No, I doubt that. I think they're going to be talking about that children's strike or whatever tomorrow. Well, just wait. Just with a straight face, they'll talk about crimes against humanity and all this other stuff. Why we all got to pony up even more for the war machine. It's just, I can't do it anymore. I really can't. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.